Marcus's neighbors, alerted by the commotion, arrived to help drive the animals back through the gaps in the fencing. By dawn, most of the herd had been recovered, though several prize breeding cows were still missing. Tom Bradley surveyed the damage with a grim expression. This wasn't random vandalism, Marcus. Someone wanted to hurt you specifically. I know, Marcus replied, exhaustion weighing heavy in his voice. The question is what they'll try next. Agent Foster approached them as the last of the cattle were being secured. Mr. Thompson, Jason Webb is ready to make a deal. He's scared of going to federal prison and even more scared of what the collector might do to him for getting caught. What kind of deal? Information in exchange for witness protection. He claims he can lead us to the warehouse where Emma was held, and potentially to other locations used by the trafficking network. Marcus felt a surge of hope, and the collector. That's where it gets complicated. Webb says he's never met the man directly. All contact goes through intermediaries, but he has described the delivery process, and it matches what Emma told us about the house in the mountains. They walked toward the command post Foster had established in Marcus's barn. Maps covered a folding table, marked with red pins indicating suspected trafficking routes and possible safe houses. Based on Webb's information and Emma's descriptions, we've narrowed the collector's location to a roughly 50 square mile area in the Beartooth Mountains, Foster explained. Properties with substantial homes, isolated locations, and the kind of security fencing Emma described. How many possibilities? 17. We're running background checks on all the property owners, looking for anything that raises red flags. But this is where we need your help, Mr. Thompson. Marcus looked up from the map. How? You know this area better than anyone. You've lived here for decades. You know the people, the properties, the local history. If someone has been operating a criminal enterprise in these mountains, there might be signs only a local would recognize. Foster spread out a more detailed topographical map, pointing to the 17 marked locations. These are our targets. I need you to look at each one and tell me anything you know about the owners, the properties, any unusual activity you might have noticed over the years. Marcus studied the map carefully. Most of the properties were familiar to him, wealthy out-of-state landowners who'd built vacation homes or hunting lodges in the remote areas. But 3 locations stood out immediately. This one, he said, pointing to a property high in the mountains about 30 miles northeast of his ranch. The Whitmore Place. Daniel Whitmore bought it about 5 years ago, supposedly for a corporate retreat center. But I've never seen any corporate groups up there, and the locals who have done construction work for him say the interior layout is unusual. Unusual how? Multiple small rooms with heavy-duty locks, reinforced doors, soundproofing. When questioned about it, Whitmore claimed it was for executive meditation retreats, but the workers thought it was weird. Foster made notes. What about Whitmore himself? Rich, arrogant, treats the locals like servants. He's from back east somewhere, made his money in tech or finance. Keeps to himself mostly, but when he does interact with people in town, there's something off about him. Too interested in asking about local families, especially families with young kids. Has anyone reported suspicious activity at his property? Marcus thought carefully. Not reported officially, but there's been talk. Delivery trucks at odd hours, helicopter traffic, expensive cars coming and going. The kind of activity that doesn't match a corporate retreat center. Foster circled the Whitmore property on her map. What about these other two you were looking at? The Morrison Ranch here, Marcus pointed to another location, was foreclosed on last year. It's been empty since then, but I've seen lights there at night sometimes. Could be squatters, could be something else. And the third, the old Eastman mining compound. It's been abandoned for 20 years, but someone's been maintaining the access roads. Fresh gravel, cleared brush. I always assumed it was the Forest Service, but now I'm not so sure. Agent Foster studied the 3 locations Marcus had identified. These all fit the profile. Remote, isolated, with existing infrastructure that could be modified for criminal purposes. She called over another agent. I want surveillance teams on all 3 properties immediately, and I want full background checks on Daniel Whitmore going back 10 years. As the FBI team prepared for their expanded investigation, Marcus found himself thinking about Emma. She was still in the hospital, still healing from her ordeal, but she'd shown remarkable courage in helping the investigation. Now they might finally be close to finding the monster who'd tried to buy her. His phone rang. The hospital. Dr. Chen's voice was urgent when he answered. "Mr. Thompson, Emma's asking for you. Something's happened. She remembered something important, but she'll only tell you." Marcus looked at Agent Foster, who was coordinating search teams. "I need to go to the hospital. Emma has more information." "I'll meet you there," Foster said. "If she's remembered something new, it could be the break we need." The drive to Billings took 45 minutes, during which Marcus's mind raced with possibilities. Emma had already provided crucial information about the collector and the trafficking operation. What else could she have remembered? At the hospital, Dr. Chen met them at the elevator. She woke up from a nightmare about 2 hours ago, but this time, instead of being upset, she was excited. She said she remembered something that could help catch the bad men. Emma was sitting up in bed when they entered her room, more animated than Marcus had seen her since the rescue. "Marcus, Agent Foster, I remembered something important." "What is it, Emma?" Foster asked gently. "The man who put me in the cage, he had a ring. A big gold ring with a symbol on it. I couldn't see it clearly before because I was so scared, but in my dream I saw it perfectly." Emma grabbed a piece of paper from her bedside table. She'd drawn a symbol, a complex design that looked like intertwined letters or perhaps a family crest. It looked exactly like this. And when he was making that phone call, I heard him say something else I'd forgotten. He called the collector Mr. D and mentioned something about a mining operation. Foster and Marcus exchanged glances. A mining operation. The abandoned Eastman mining compound was suddenly looking like more than just a coincidence. "Emma, this is incredible," Foster said. "You might have just given us the key to finding where you were supposed to be taken." "There's more," Emma continued. "The man with the ring, he mentioned that Mr. D was particular about timing. He said all deliveries had to happen on certain days of the month when the moon was dark. He was superstitious or something." Foster consulted her calendar. "The next new moon is in 4 days, if they're planning to make another delivery. We might have a chance to catch them in the act," Marcus finished. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Emma called out to Marcus one more time. "When you catch them, I want to testify. I want to look them in the eyes and tell the world what they did. They need to know they didn't win." Marcus felt a surge of pride in this remarkable girl. "Emma, you've already won. You survived, you're healing, and you're helping to make sure no other children go through what you did. That takes more courage than most adults will ever have." Driving back to the ranch with Agent Foster, Marcus reflected on how much had changed since that morning when he'd found Emma in the cage. What had started as a simple rescue had evolved into a complex federal investigation, targeting what appeared to be a sophisticated criminal network. But more than that, it had given him a sense of purpose he hadn't felt since Sarah's death. He was no longer just a lonely widower going through the motions of daily life. He was a man with a mission, fighting to protect children and bring justice to those who would prey on the innocent. "Mr. Thompson," Foster said as they neared the ranch, "I want you to know that without your help, we never would have gotten this far. Emma trusts you, and that trust has been crucial in getting her to open up about her experiences. Emma's the hero here, not me. That girl has more strength and courage than I could ever hope to have." "Maybe, but courage is contagious, Mr. Thompson. She's drawing strength from yours, just like you're drawing inspiration from hers." As they pulled into Marcus's driveway, both of them were thinking about the next 4 days. Somewhere in the mountains, a predator called the Collector was waiting for his next victim. But this time, Instead of finding a terrified child, he was going to find a team of federal agents ready to bring his reign of terror to an end. The final confrontation was coming, and Marcus intended to be part of it. Part 5. The surveillance operation began at dawn 3 days before the new moon. Agent Foster had assembled a team of 20 federal agents, coordinating with local law enforcement and the state police. Marcus found himself appointed as a civilian consultant, his knowledge of the terrain proving invaluable in positioning surveillance teams around the 3 target properties. The Whitmore compound was their primary focus. Background checks had revealed that Daniel Whitmore's wealth came from a series of suspicious business deals, and his property purchases in Montana coincided with a spike in missing children reports across the western states. More importantly, satellite imagery showed recent construction at the compound that matched Emma's description of special rooms. Marcus was positioned with Agent Foster and 2 tech specialists in a concealed observation post overlooking the Whitmore property from a neighboring ridge. Through high-powered binoculars, they could see the main house, a sprawling log mansion surrounded by an 8-foot security fence. Outbuildings included what appeared to be a workshop, a large garage, and a structure that might have been guest quarters or something else entirely. Movement in the main house, reported Agent Davis, monitoring electronic surveillance equipment. Heat signatures suggest 3 to 4 individuals inside. Foster spoke into her radio. All units maintain position. We wait for them to make the first move. The waiting was the hardest part. Marcus found his mind drifting to Emma, who was being kept in protective custody at a secure location. She'd wanted to be part of the operation, to face her tormentors directly, but Foster had explained that her safety was paramount. If the collector realized law enforcement was involved, he might disappear forever, leaving other victims to suffer. As afternoon turned to evening, their patience was rewarded. A black SUV with tinted windows pulled through the compound's gates, followed by a white van, the same type of vehicle Emma had described being transported in. "This is it," Foster whispered. "All units, we have vehicles arriving at the primary target. Prepare for possible movement." Through their binoculars, Marcus watched as several men exited the vehicles. One of them was clearly in charge, directing the others with authoritative gestures. Even at a distance, there was something about the man's bearing that suggested wealth and power, expensive clothes, confident movements, complete comfort in commanding others. "That's got to be him," Marcus said. "The collector." The men unloaded something from the van, a large crate that required 2 people to carry. Marcus felt his blood run cold as he realized what might be inside. "Another victim," Foster said grimly, speaking into her radio. All units, we have a possible victim delivery in progress. Prepare to move on my signal. But before she could give the order, another vehicle appeared on the access road, a pickup truck that Marcus recognized immediately. "That's Jason Webb's truck," he said, "the one we arrested at my ranch." Foster cursed under her breath. Webb was supposed to be in federal custody, if he's here. She grabbed her radio. "Control, this is Foster. I need immediate confirmation on the status of prisoner Jason Webb." The response came back within seconds. "Webb was released on bail 3 hours ago. His attorney posted bond before we could file additional charges." "Son of a bitch," Foster muttered. "He was baited out deliberately. They wanted him back." The situation was deteriorating rapidly. If Webb had been released to warn the collector about the investigation, the entire operation was compromised. Worse, if there was another victim in that crate, they couldn't wait for backup. "We move now," Foster decided. "All units execute immediately." The assault began with flashbang grenades and shouted commands as federal agents emerged from concealment around the compound. Marcus watched from the observation post as tactical teams breached the security fence and surrounded the buildings. But something was wrong. The response from inside the compound was too organized, too prepared. Instead of panic and confusion, the occupants seemed to be following a predetermined plan. "It's a trap," Marcus said, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "They knew we were coming." Even as he spoke, he could see muzzle flashes from the compound buildings as the occupants opened fire on the approaching agents. What should have been a swift arrest operation had turned into a firefight. Foster was coordinating the tactical response when Marcus noticed movement in the main house. Someone was carrying what looked like a person, small, limp, possibly unconscious, toward a helicopter landing pad behind the building. "There's a chopper pad," Marcus said urgently. "Someone's carrying a victim toward it." Foster followed his gaze and saw the same thing. In the distance, the sound of rotor blades was becoming audible. "They're going to escape," she said, speaking rapidly into her radio. "All units, priority target is the helicopter pad. Do not let that aircraft take off." But even as the agents moved to intercept, Marcus could see they wouldn't make it in time. The helicopter, a military-style aircraft painted black, was already settling onto the landing pad. The man carrying the victim was running toward it, protected by covering fire from the compound buildings. Marcus made a decision that surprised even himself. Without waiting for permission or backup, he left the observation post and began running down the ridge toward the compound. He knew terrain and hunting trails that the federal agents didn't, shortcuts that might let him reach the helicopter pad before the aircraft could take off. "Thompson, get back here," Foster shouted after him, but Marcus was already disappearing into the trees. He ran harder than he had in years, crashing through underbrush and leaping over fallen logs. His lungs burned and his legs ached, but the image of another child being taken kept him moving. He thought of Emma, of her courage and determination, of her trust in him to help catch the people who had hurt her. Marcus emerged from the tree line just as the helicopter was preparing to lift off. The man he assumed was the collector was climbing into the aircraft, still carrying the unconscious form. In the harsh light from the helicopter's searchlight, Marcus could see it was a girl, maybe 12 years old, drugged or injured. Without thinking, Marcus raised his rifle and fired at the helicopter's tail rotor. The shot was perfect, severing hydraulic lines and causing the aircraft to settle back onto the pad with its engines whining in distress. The collector jumped out of the disabled helicopter, leaving the girl behind, and began running toward a waiting motorcycle. Marcus gave chase, his rancher's boots pounding against the compound's gravel paths. "Federal agents," Marcus shouted, "stop right there." The collector spun around, and for the first time Marcus got a clear look at his face. Daniel Whitmore was in his 50s, well-groomed and expensive-looking even in the midst of a gun battle. But his eyes were what Marcus would remember, cold, calculating, completely devoid of empathy or humanity. "You have no idea what you've cost me," Whitmore said, his voice cultured and calm despite the chaos around them. "That girl was worth $50,000, and she was specifically requested by a very important client." "She's not merchandise," Marcus replied, keeping his rifle trained on Whitmore. "She's a human being." Whitmore laughed, a sound that chilled Marcus to the bone. "You're naive, Mr. Thompson. Yes, I know who you are. I know about your dead wife, your failing ranch, your pathetic little life. Do you really think stopping me will change anything? There are a dozen men ready to take my place, 100 clients ready to pay for what I provide. Maybe, but you won't be one of them anymore." The standoff ended when Agent Foster and her team arrived, surrounding Whitmore with overwhelming force. As they placed him in handcuffs, he looked directly at Marcus with those cold eyes. "This isn't over, rancher. The network is bigger than you can imagine, more powerful. You've won one battle, but the war continues." Marcus felt no satisfaction in the capture, only a grim determination to see justice done. As EMTs worked to revive the unconscious girl, he thought about all the children who hadn't been as lucky, all the victims who would never go home. The investigation that followed revealed the true scope of the trafficking operation. Whitmore's compound contained evidence of dozens of victims, detailed records of transactions, and connections to similar operations across multiple states. The special rooms Emma had described were found exactly as she'd remembered them, soundproofed cells designed to hold children until they could be sold to the highest bidder. Emma's testimony was crucial in securing Whitmore's conviction. When the trial began 6 months later, she took the stand with quiet dignity, looking directly at the man who had planned to buy her as she described her ordeal. Her strength in that moment broke the case wide open, inspiring other victims to come forward with their own stories. Marcus was there for every day of the trial, sitting in the gallery to support Emma and the other survivors. When the jury returned their verdict, guilty on all counts, he felt Sarah's presence beside him, reminding him that justice delayed is not always justice denied. Daniel Whitmore was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His network was dismantled, his assets seized and distributed to victim compensation funds. But as he'd predicted, others tried to take his place. The fight against human trafficking didn't end with his conviction. It evolved into a larger battle that required constant vigilance. Emma recovered, slowly but steadily. She was placed with a loving foster family and eventually adopted by people who understood her trauma and supported her healing. She stayed in touch with Marcus, sending him letters and photos as she rebuilt her life. She returned to school, made friends, and even began speaking at conferences about human trafficking, using her experience to educate others and advocate for victims. The Double T Ranch became something different after that summer. Marcus still raised cattle and maintained his land, but he also worked with law enforcement agencies, providing consultation on rural trafficking cases and helping to identify suspicious activity in remote areas. His property served as a training ground for agents learning to recognize signs of criminal activity in agricultural communities. 3 years later, Marcus received a graduation announcement in the mail. Emma Rodriguez was finishing high school, having been accepted to college with a full scholarship. She planned to study criminology and law, with the goal of becoming a prosecutor specializing in crimes against children. The note she included with the announcement was simple: "Thank you for saving my life and showing me that good people still exist in this world. I'm going to spend my life making sure other children don't go through what I did. You gave me back my future, and I'm going to make it count." Marcus framed the announcement and hung it in his kitchen, where he could see it every morning when he had his coffee. It reminded him that even in the darkest moments, when evil seemed overwhelming and justice seemed impossible, ordinary people could make extraordinary differences. He thought often about that morning when he'd heard crying coming from the Patterson barn. A simple decision to investigate had changed everything, not just for Emma, but for him as well. It had given him a purpose beyond grief, a mission beyond merely surviving each day. Sarah would have been proud, he knew. She'd always believed that their ranch was meant to be a place of safety and healing. In ways she never could have imagined, it had become exactly that, a sanctuary where broken children could begin to heal, and where a broken man had learned to fight again. The sign on Marcus's gate no longer just read Double T Ranch. Below it, in smaller letters, were the words Safe Haven, a promise to any child who might need sanctuary, and a warning to anyone who would prey on the innocent. Some battles end with victory. Others evolve into lifelong missions. For Marcus Thompson, finding Emma in that cage had been the beginning of both.